Cool. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started right here and get going here at 5. Um, Thank you all for being here. It's good to see you again. It's funny because sometimes we see each other in the steering committee meeting or something else, but technically speaking, we've been on a break. So we're back and hopefully people are enjoying the summer and the final moments of summer. I was saying astrologically, we've got like another week left of summer, so soak it up some way or another. Um, we're gonna jump right into the conversation, or at least our opening, and I'm first going to welcome M to kick off our safety moment. So M, please take it away.
Thank you, Ishmael. Hi, everyone. Good evening. As you know, I'm new to the team, and so I've been learning a lot over the last couple months about PSE's safety culture and energy equity. And so for today, I wanted to focus on how these issues are interrelated. So I'm going to supplement the slides here with the chat. I'm going to go over this very briefly. In short, while anybody can experience an incident, vulnerable and low-income communities tend to experience higher risk of incidents and more severe impacts. And that is due to things like infrastructure disparities, environmental hazards and impacts, health disparities from social and environmental conditions, working higher risk jobs with fewer workplace protections, and then limited access to things like healthcare recovery time, like PTO, as well as financial safety nets. And I wanted to bring this up because all of the efforts of everyone in this group work together to make stabler and safer and overall more resilient communities. That's what we're here to do. So one of the outcomes of that is going to be supporting and achieving the culture of safety that PSE really values, where people can both better prevent incidents and respond effectively and recover fully. So in that way, the culture of safety is a culture of equity. Um, and I just wanted to tie that together. Back to you, Ishmael.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. So appreciate you kicking us off with that. Okay. I'd love to invite TJ to provide us with to this afternoon's equity moment. Thank you, TJ. Two things that came up for me as you were talking. One of them is tying back to the safety moment, and you actually touched on it when you referred to it as like sometimes it's a microaggression, not to like have maintain eye contact or but yeah, being an active listener, showing that to other people that you're there for them is a way to build trust and safety. And so it like psychological safety, I appreciate your point that it's like it might seem obvious or that we're always doing it, but it's an actually a very intentional step in order to make and develop trust and safety. And yeah, I will just say for myself, yeah, like you mentioned, working across cultures and across languages, working with interpreters, working in communities that are not my own, of often come up against some of those humble realizations. And so, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's actually very important underlying work to equity work is sort of just human dynamics. How do we engage with each other and affirm each other? So awesome. Thanks, TJ. Cool. Okay. Um, I want to share a couple of announcements as we're getting started. So today, we were making mention of this before the meeting started. We've got Michael Wheeling from PSC, who is topic one and topic two. We're gonna get a little break, but it's the Michael sort of focal point here from PSE. Obviously, we've got a lot of moments here for discussion and interaction. I'm really excited for the session. As we get into that, though, a couple things to acknowledge. Firstly, today is the first day of Hispanic or Latinx or Latine Heritage Month. Runs from September 15th through October 15th. A lot of celebrations, things going on and around in King County and the broader Puget Sound area. If people know of things or want to plug something, feel free to use the chat if there's something that you're planning to go to and attend. Let us know about it, and we can definitely pay attention to that. So want to just say that first and foremost. Second thing I want to say is we are very excited for the EAG retreat that's going to be happening next month. We've been plugging and talking about this for a long time. And if you're excited about it too, that's great. We need you to RSVP. Very, very important. If you're making plans, I do this all the time. I make these plans in my head and I don't often tell the other people. And and I forget we need the RSVPs. We've got an email out today from Arium that did a little brief sort of snippet intro to Julia from our team who's coordinating with the venue. Thank you, Em, for sharing in the chat. So we are providing overnight accommodation. We are opening up the invitation for EAG members to bring folks along, family, spouses, partners, kids. And so we just need all of those details. We'll need details on sort of dietary restrictions, etc. So if you could please make sure that you actually RSVP, that would be great. I know there's a calendar link that went out. If you responded to that, great. Please also use the Eventbrite link. Awesome. Okay. Couple other quick announcements. One thing I just wanted to acknowledge one of our EAG members, Betsy Bafa, who is not with us here tonight. She has left her organization, African Community Housing and Development. And so as her leaving off of the organization, will also be leaving off of the EAG. So we thank Betsy for her time and appreciation for her contributions. And I also want to say on the other side of the coin, we're very excited, again, shared out in an email to welcome a new member to the EAG. I'll give a kudos to a couple of members that helped in the recruitment process. And we now have Rachel Gates joining on as an EAG member. Rachel is in this meeting. If you want to, if you're able to, come off camera and maybe take 30 seconds to say hello. Rachel will be officially joining the group in October, but she's ready to go. So she's here. And Rachel, yeah, if you want to just come off mute and just say a brief intro of yourself would be Rachel. Thank you for being here. We're super excited. I know for some of the folks, like I mentioned, that we're a little close in the recruitment process. I know that we're all excited for you joining. So super happy that you're here and looking forward to getting to know you more. Okay. Last announcement is I also want to acknowledge and welcome. We have a couple of guests today. I see Charlie and Jean Marie guests. We opened up some of the invitation to today's meeting to LIAC members and Craig members. And so I can see a couple of folks are joining us today. I know EAG members have attended LIAC meetings. We've had people come here before too. So we've got sort of this fluid opportunities of interacting with each other as advisory committee and advisory group members. So welcome to our invited guests. As always, we want to prioritize the space and conversation for EAG members, but we obviously want to make sure that you all get a chance to contribute if you've got things that you want to say and add into the dialogue. So thank you for being here. Okay. That's my list of, I think there's a housekeeping slide, but I touched on what I was going to say there already. So as always, we want to encourage active participation, active listening and engagement. We've got a setup in today's topic that I think is going to be really interesting, hopefully, in the way that we sort of dive into some of these equity tensions and issues, and then how they help us set up the things that we need to be responsive to. And so, as always, I will do my part in helping to move us along in the conversation if we need to, or focusing on the pieces that are most important. But obviously, the value and quality of the meeting will be the richness of all of you participating. And then as always, we've got folks on our YouTube link, and we'll have a moment near the end of the meeting to provide an opportunity for public comment, and instructions will be provided later in the meeting for how to jump in if you'd like. And I already went through these housekeeping. Register. By next week, Monday, is when we need confirmation if you're planning to stay the night at the retreat. So if you're thinking about it and still trying to workshop it, try and get that through in this week. Okay. I am going to hand the baton over here to Michael. As Michael goes through these pieces, know that we've got some space and opportunity for discussion and dialogue. We've got an interactive activity, which I will describe when we get to it. We'll be using Mural platform. So just as an FYI, if you're on your desktop, we'll provide the link at that point in time. If anyone has any trouble, we'll troubleshoot at that point in the meeting. But yeah, happy to have Michael tee us up so we can get to that discussion and activity. So Michael, I'll toggle your slides as you let me.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here tonight and giving of your time and priority to equity. I'm happy to be here with you in service of that as for PSE. Ishmael, we'll go ahead and just move right into the first slide where I'll talk about what we're here tonight to do. Our first focus is, well, our overall focus is going to be defining equity metrics. So how should PSE measure equity specifically for our net energy metering program? And we'll also give some considerations to another set of programs. In that first one, we'll be considering some dimensions of that and specifically looking at community and individual dimensions of how we might measure equity for the net energy metering program. And then secondly, we're going to look at our portfolio strategy. And when we're talking about that, what we mean is a suite or a group of distributed energy resource programs that by the end of 2025 have a goal of delivering 80 megawatts of clean energy. Okay. Lastly, before we go on, we are going to consult with you. We have 3 built-in periods if everything goes according to plan where I will stop talking and we'll hear a lot more from all of you. So just wanted to mention that as well. Okay, we are going to go through these parts or these programs in the overall 80 megawatts in more detail later. But our first focus tonight is really to look at the net energy metering program. It's the oldest DER program that we have in the portfolio. And important to note, at the time it was created, it wasn't designed for equity. And we're developing programs that are and continuing to reevaluate that now. But that's just a piece of context I wanted to bring forward. And then lastly, through the work that we're going to do discussing how we bring forward the equity metrics from the net energy metering program, that's going to set up how we might apply that to the other programs that are in the portfolio later on. All right. So we're going to return to the origin story of the net energy metering program back in 1998. It was put together in the state of Washington for a variety of reasons to incentivize the development of the solar energy industry in the state of Washington. We wanted to be able to build solar components here in the state of Washington, create more jobs in doing so, and improve the economy in the state of Washington. And of course, we also wanted to improve the environment through a reduction of climate gases that increase global climate warming, climate change. And, there were a variety of other benefits over time. It was, designed that the cost of solar equipment, solar panels would drop as we built up this, got more and more of them available and that sort of thing, improve the market for them. Now, to do all this was a very big lift. And so as people got together to design this in 1998, they said, we're going to need some incentives to get this off the ground. And that's why we have a picture of the space shuttle. We'll talk about more there. It's a really big thing. It's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of lift to get this into orbit and make it work. And so as a part of that, there were some financial incentives that were designed in order to get people to participate in it. And that story at the very beginning went a little bit like this. If you're buying electricity, you're probably paying about 7 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. And we'll make this deal that we've got a deal for you. If you buy your solar panels made in Washington, your inverter made in Washington, and your other parts and pieces of your whole solar array that you're going to install at your location in Washington, you could earn as much as 52 cents a kilowatt hour to sell that power back. So you're buying at 7 cents. You could sell at 52 if you had everything made in Washington. It was a great deal that attracted people to start participating in the program. Now, it changed over time as what the deal was, but that's kind of how it started out to get it off the ground. So I'm just going to leave it there as sort of where we came from at the beginning. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So you may wonder why we have the space shuttle there and why is the net energy metering program like the space shuttle? What do we mean by that? Well, there are different players that have different roles. So we're going to go ahead and step through how that looks. All right, next slide, please. So originally, over on the left, you have mission control. So that was the legislature creating the program and the UTC putting the rules in place. How are we going to do this and that sort of thing. The launch pad, the state of Washington, we're going to build this economy, get this thing off the ground. The incentives that I described are designed by the state, by that group to give thrust or lift to this program. And we're thinking about the rocket as PSE and PSE's specific delivery of this program from that time until now. We can go ahead and edit. All right. Then in recent years, there have been two important or significant changes since this program started. The first one is that you can see on the right there, the boosters on this program in 1998, they were always designed at some point to come off. Someday, solar panels would be more affordable. We won't need to have these extra benefits and that sort of thing to them. That was the thinking back then. And as time has gone on, in March of 2024, PSEs, you can see in the orange at the bottom, crossed the 4% threshold of measurement for when the net energy metering program had reached its goal. And so the condition of the program changed at that moment. Secondly, over on the left of mission control, you can see there are new voices that have been added to it, specifically the advisory groups, why we're all here, the equity advisory group, the low income advisory committee, and the conservation resources advisory group, all part of those voices added to mission control. And they'll be looking to help us guide as we go forward here. And these two changes raise some new questions. Do we need different boosters? Do we need boosters at all? Do we need to make repairs to the space shuttle? Do we need new guidance in this mission? You know, not just the space shuttle, but of course the NEM program we're speaking about here. All right, we can go to the next slide. So another part of this, when PSE crossed the threshold, the UTC, Washington Utilities and Transportation Committee, Councils, I'm saying it wrong. Washington, somebody give me a help here. Commission. Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission said, hey, PSE, when you cross that threshold, this became a different program. And because it's part of that 80 megawatts now of clean energy resources, you need to assess it for equity. We want you to do that using a distributional equity analysis tool, and we want you to do that with the equity advisory group. And so tonight we're going to be looking at the metrics for how we'll go about doing that with the program. Okay. All right, so we've just mentioned again, the UTC required us to do an equity analysis of that, and it follows a specific framework that was developed by Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories and the Department of Energy. It has 7 total steps. We're doing 4 of them. The first one that we've gathered the groups that I just mentioned, the advisory groups, to participate in performing the analysis. Secondly, you might remember last November, Leslie Moynihan from PSE did the step of articulating the context. She spoke about the NEM program and went through the history of it, how it's implemented at PSE, all the details around that. The third step was identifying priority populations. And last spring, I spoke with you and we talked about Well, what are the different ways we could identify populations? And we talked about our named communities, which are organized at the block group level, and we talked about data we have at the customer level, where we can see the actual customer locations and how there are advantages or disadvantages to each of those. And we landed on using the customer level and the low income customer indicator of setting aside the priority population to examine. So we come through all that thus far along. And tonight we're going to be looking at the metric step, step 4, and how do we decide using metrics if the program is equitable or not, and what would we do about that? Okay.
Thank you, Michael. I'm gonna do just a really quick pause and just that's sort of the main setup of today. So Michael's right. In November, many of us were introduced to the NEM program. We talked about sort of the ability to Michael's point, being able to generate energy that gets sold back to the grid. A lot of that happens through solar, et cetera. Um, do folks have any questions about sort of the setup? The rocket ship was hopefully to make something not so opaque a little bit more accessible, but I want to make sure that if anyone is feels like they're out on the context to flag it here. Or do folks feel okay about what we just went through? Yeah, see?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Michael, thanks for the analogy. I think that's really helpful. As a lot of other people have said, I have a really broad contextual question. What is the overall um, capacity of all of PSC's generation resources? Do you know?
I don't know the overall megawatts. That's something we can flag to find out, though.
Yeah, that would just be helpful to kind of contextualize how much of this 80 megawatts is as part of the larger portfolio that PSC has. Thank you.
Mhm.
And we'll be tracking that as well to make sure that we get a follow-up, at least close to the summary. I saw Monica say background context, really helpful. Thank you. So that's positive. I'll go to Amy's hand, and if there's anyone else, we'll move forward. But just want to make sure that folks are on the same page.
I just thank you so much, Ishmael, and thank you so much for being here and presenting this analogy. And I also can't help but think about like very similar to the space age push to get to the moon and how like many communities were left out of that process and with some hidden figures talking about some notable exceptions, of course. I just feel I'm really glad that we can contribute to this process now, but it's really difficult when like the space shuttle was built 25 years ago or however long it is to like come in at this step. And I just like wanted to name that feeling of like I'm glad that we are here today. And it also is a really, really challenging thing to like literally rebuild the ship as it's flying. And I feel a lot of weight in like being invited into this conversation when so much has already happened. So I just wanted to name that. I don't know if I'm the only one who is feeling like that, but like I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I also just want to acknowledge like how challenging it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, thank you, Amy, and I appreciate that reaction. And Michael, before I pass it back to you, I'll just say that one of the things that I know is inherent in, if people paid attention, the way that this section is titled on the agenda is navigating equity tensions. That's one of those tensions, is that we have in this timeline, this sort of retroactive, Michael said explicitly, this was not designed as a program to, I won't say solve for, but address inequities. And so now the collective we here, PSC is in this moment where to be compliant and to, support the larger goals, you're doing so on a program that is, from 1998, 1999. And so you're totally right, Amy, and I'll let Michael refer to any more of that tension as we get into this part of the discussion. And I think, Michael, that's also why maybe you were acknowledging, and if there's lessons here into the other parts of the 80 megawatt portfolio where the rocket isn't so high in the orbit.
All right. Thank you, Ishmael. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Z, for your questions. I appreciate them. All right. So as we've been going through this, we at PSE have been thinking about our conversations with you. And these are a couple of examples of things that have come up that we felt was really important to bring forward into this context tonight. One of them was the last EAG meeting in July, where it was really clear when this question came up towards the end of the meeting from all of you, is technology implementation really driving how equity is framed in our programs? And if so, what does that say about community voices and community priorities? And that really got surfaced and was real clear. And took that in and have been thinking about that and want to reflect that in tonight. The second one was during the August LIAC meeting, a question was raised about, well, what about low-income people who are participating in that energy metering program, and they're depending on how the program was designed for the plans that they had made, especially if it was difficult to get the resources to participate. What might happen there? It's an important question to consider. And then another feedback question we have is, how are benefits distributed and felt? Who's benefiting? How are they benefiting? And that sort of thing. And we'll explore that with you tonight as we get into our activities. Right. And so we're almost here to our first discussion, and I want to just take the opportunity to frame up this tension here that we wanted to bring into the discussion tonight, and that is individuals and communities. So two different perspectives on the programs, both on who adopts the program or participates in it, and who benefits from it, and how is that divided up. So I'm just going to start with a small example to kind of, give some context, but really turn it over to you to explore this further in the discussion. So if we think about an individual customer adopting the net energy metering program, typically that probably means they have a home or a location where they are able to install solar panels and participate in the program. And we could think about some of the benefits they might get. Well, there's one benefit that clearly the environment's benefiting. We're adding more solar energy, renewable energy. We're contributing to climate solutions rather than climate change. Another second benefit is that somebody had to do the work to put the panels on the roof or wherever they're located. And so that created jobs. And that also, is a benefit that we can consider. And then a third benefit, of course, is the financial benefit, as we discussed. The customer has to get together the capital or the money to be able to afford the system in the first place. And then over time, they get compensated for the energy they get, and eventually they start getting a financial advantage from that in time. So to sum up again, there's environmental benefits, there's economic benefits in terms of jobs created, and then there's the financial or personal benefits in the case of the individual. Now, if there's a community adoption for the NEM program, we might think, for example, maybe there is a church that decided to either finance or take up a collection to put an NEM installation on their building. And so we could think through, okay, that's a community adoption of this particular program. And much the same as an individual, there's benefits, right? Those same benefits, the environment benefits in terms of reduced emissions. It took jobs. Somebody had to do that work to put the installation on the church. And then there's a financial benefit in terms of eventually the church's electric bill gets paid off and they're able to benefit from the financial benefits of that system. But we might also think about or imagine there could be some additional community benefits in terms of things that that community church might offer. For example, some churches might offer a food shelf for people in the neighborhood around their church, or an emergency shelter for people who are unsheltered. There might be mental health resources. There could be a variety of things as well. So that's when we're beginning to think about additional community benefits and what might those be. It's not to say that an individual might not do that too with some of their money, but just to set up that tension or that set of ideas between individuals and communities and how we start to think about that critically in our discussion. So from there, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ishmael, and let you bring us into our discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm adding in the chat just some shorthand of those sort of benefits. And basically you could think of this like a 2x2 grid. It's not in that visual on the screen right now, which I think is okay. And I think ultimately today we're going to be talking about metrics, and there's going to be some questions about sort of how do we measure, what do we measure? But before we get into that conversation, we wanted to sort of tee up that there is this tension that individual adoption doesn't necessarily mean individual benefit, and that the initiation of this rocket and those boosters really sought that, okay, the way that this is going to be adopted widely is if we incentivize individuals financially. The burden, not even, I shouldn't say use the burden, but with the idea that the ultimate goal was to meet these environmental clean energy targets. As Michael has described, there's a whole mix mash of array of who and what can adopt and how much, and who and what can benefit and how much. And there's been equity and inequity issues throughout those different relationships. And so we wanted to see how you all sort of see those interrelationships. What are things that you see as flags, and what do you think are the priorities as it relates to measuring benefits, which we're ultimately going to talk about in a little bit. And if there's any questions for clarification, also on the table.
Okay, Ishmael, I just wanted to check, was there, I thought there was going to be a discussion here with the group, or no? Yes?
Yeah. Sorry if I wasn't clear. I was not asking a rhetorical question. However, if the folks in the group see anything worth noting about the relationship between sort of the responsibility or the opportunities provided for an individual participating in net energy metering versus community. And in this case, an example that Michael gave, think about, let's say, a food bank participating in net energy metering, and the relationship to the benefits, an individual receiving a cost saving of having a solar panel on their roof, or the community benefit of being able to meet some of these targets and goals. What do you see in those relationships that's worth noting? Yeah, TJ. C is talking about, and I think others as well, and I'll read out the chat, sort of this disaggregation of benefits, and that's an important thing to actually see and understand, not just assume that that is sort of an equal opportunity. And then I'm going to move on sort of in the hands, but C pointed out, and then I think it would be great to mention, you said some of those drawbacks. So the sort of door opening for quote benefit, which part of what we talked about in this prepping for this meeting was defining what is a benefit, is also some of those drawbacks. And that as you're trying to assess for equity in sort of these programs, that we also have to acknowledge where some of those drawbacks are happening. And then I appreciate you, Sion, talking about sort of the accessibility of the chat. Yeah, I would love for folks to come into the conversation. I'll read out what's in the chat, but then if you can jump in would be great, or if you have things to elaborate on, because yeah, we'd love a sole sort of source of focus. Monica said, I'm concerned about the benefits being called out since all of our benefits are in the context of our current reality that is structurally built against our named communities. As an example, jobs are being created, but for whom? Who? That ties a little bit back to Amy's sort of crux of this issue of the rocket has already been in the sky for so long. Amy says, a question I have is how many people living under 80% area median income are benefiting directly? Can we give incentives to landlords for actually providing the services to this group? Monica's +1 would love for us to discuss how a net metering scenario could somehow work for a landlord renter scenario. I've seen a few balcony solar options, but not sure whether they can be integrated into the grid. And then M added a detail on the NEM portfolio. Again, we'll encourage folks to bring conversations into the chat. So I think this disaggregation of benefits is a really good point. This sort of naming these disadvantages is relevant. And so if others have things to say to that, please do. But we'll go to Dennis and then Monica. Thanks, Dennis. We're going to actually make a connection before the end of the meeting is our goal to sort of the rest of that pie chart actually, and acknowledge that even the conversation we're having is going to be different. Again, going back to Amy's point about sort of where in the sky these sort of respective rockets are. But good point, Dennis. We'll go to Monica, Megan, Marco. This is really good. And then hopefully this will help tee us up for what we want to talk about here on metrics. So go ahead, Monica. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Monica. That's really great. And I think so you also echoed that disaggregation piece. You used an example of, jobs and which I think was a little bit of what C was getting at. We can't just assume that if we see a metric improving, let's say that we note that like increase in clean energy jobs is an improvement or something positive, that we can just accept that there aren't inherent disaggregations and disparities within that. So there's an important nuance in that. You also talked about the fact that our named communities are not static and they're changing. Who is in that band, in that sort of umbrella, and who was in that band in those umbrellas is changing. And I think that that's something that is an aspirational thing for many. And I think Ariam said this in that meeting in November, it's like you want to be able to say, I want to participate in this also, and acknowledge that even once you've moved out of one band, there's still an attention and a need for that focus. And then ultimately, I think, Monica, you're mentioning a lot about this relationship to noting what the intended impacts are, where they are most possible to be achieved. And I think this is one of those tensions, and I'll keep going on hands as we move forward. It's like we, collective PSE, has to be able to be responsive to thinking about these things in a program like net energy metering, and everyone is right, and we'll keep saying sort of the reality of, and that's not how it was designed. And so, yeah, thanks, Monica, for those points. Megan, and then Marco.
I'll try to be quick. I guess the scientist in me would really like to make a plea for more data to be able to discuss all of this. And I understand that maybe not all of the data that I want to see are there because of the fact that the equity part, right, was not baked into this from the very beginning. But, I want to see like statistics on how many people wanted to be a part of this, but didn't have the credit to get the loan that was necessary, right? Or if they did get the loan that was necessary to have the capital to, to install this, were they able to pay off their loans in a timely manner? Or did those loans then become an extra burden? Or how long did it take them to get from paying off the loans to really having the benefit of this in their lives? And I don't know that I don't know that I personally can understand it, without knowing some of these things. Because again, if we're trying to help people, I guess we need to know, did it really help people?
that was great, Megan. I'm gonna go to Marco's hand, but what you said, like, don't lose that because literally the
That's
thing we
fine.
need
Yeah,
to
I
understand.
understand. You can keep moving.
But we're going to come back to it. I just want to make sure we get to Marco because what you just said is literally exactly the thing that we're trying to understand here today is how do we better understand all of these different components? And you just shared a couple of ideas. So I'm going to invite you to do that again here in a little bit. But yes, please, Marco.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Just talking and I think Karya earlier on the adoption piece. How do we improve and support adoption? Those were the boosters on the rockets. Benefits and individual versus community, all the things that sort of Megan, for example, was just rattling off. So this is exactly where we wanted the headspace. It's an imperfect resolution, but what we want to do is be able to tee up here our conversation around metrics. So I'm going to invite Michael to, if you have any reactions, please do, but invite you to sort of tee up where PSC is at in thinking about this conversation, and then I'll introduce people to the platform for feedback.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. That's what we had hoped for, some robust discussion to begin thinking about how we're going to assess equity. Some great thoughts. So we'll have two more slides before we step into that platform. And this first one here is just to give you sort of a background for distributional equity analyses. What have we done in the past? Some of the things we've looked at for metrics are participation in the program. That's usually sort of a foundation to get the context going of what's going on with our customer participation. We looked at bills. How has participation in a program changed a customer's bill? We've looked at, has it moved a customer in or out of energy burden? Some of those things, the metrics themselves can be, you can see in the second bullet, quantitative or qualitative. And I really want to call your attention to those two words. And I'll say more about that when we get to the platform. But for example, I heard Monica talking about jobs and access to who gets these jobs. It's not just counting jobs, which would be quantitative. Hey, we made this many jobs. Well, who gets the jobs? That's the quality part of, well, what does that mean? How do we look at that? And so those are two important distinctions as we step into the next activity. And let's see. I think from here, I'd like to go to the next slide to further go into some context here. And this slide, some of you may remember from when we spoke about the pilot of distributional equity analyses, and we looked at two community solar projects, one in Olympia and one with the Nooksack community. And one of the things that I want to call out here is the qualitative function. And so you might remember that when we went to the Nooksack location, we're looking at two project locations, and we're primarily assessing for, okay, what's the condition of the two populations that would be served by this DER? And it turned out both of those populations had quite a bit of need in terms of vulnerabilities, people who were energy burdened and that sort of thing. And there were maybe some different volumes, but there were two opportunities to improve equity at either site. But the community also said, one of these sites has the opportunity to include an energy storage, a battery with it, a battery backup. And you know what? We really value right now taking care of our elders. And this particular site where we could have the storage is an apartment complex. And what we envision is that if we choose this site, that means we will have more resilience during an outage. That means our elders, if they're sheltered there, will be taken care of. And that is a community value that's important to us. And that quality in the assessment ended up guiding the selection of what site was preferred. And so that just wanted to bring that example forward of the importance of qualitative information and how that can be a part of a DEA, as well as counts of how many jobs are created, how many dollars are spent, how much were bills reduced, how many people were moved, how far out of energy burden, that sort of thing. And so really shine a light on that. And so we're going to, again, from the discussion we just had and thinking through your equity lens, we're going to be moving into another activity to begin to look at what should we do for metrics in order to assess the net energy metering program. And so with that, and this is again flagging the consult level. We're consulting with you now. We want your input into this process. So we can go to the next slide. And I think from here, Ishmael, we're going to step into the platform, correct?
Yeah. Um, so what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna go back one here for a second, or back to here for a second. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to sort of introduce the way that we're hoping to provide feedback on this conversation around metrics. Once I do that introduction, assuming people feel like, yes, I understand what I'm being asked to do, I'm also going to call for a break. So I'm going to give a sort of window of time. You can share your thoughts, but also feel like if you need to, take a moment, please do. When we come back from that break, we'll continue to invite you to use that platform. It'll be a mural link, as I described, and see what discussion we can have from that point on. So the way that we want to focus this is in a moment here. I'm going to provide a link in the chat that brings us to this platform. And this is a mural link. It should be something that once we add the link in the chat, you should be able to just open up. You might have to type your name in. And what you can see is that we're asking the question of what metrics are most relevant to assess distributed equity of net energy metering. And so I think this is the part, Megan, that we were talking about that you started off with, is thinking about, okay, what are some of the actual values that we want to be able to capture and acknowledge? And Michael teed us up on the difference between qualitative and quantitative. And what you can see on the screen are a number of colored sticky notes. When I put this link in the chat, you can zoom in and read them. And the reason they're color coded is because they mean different things from PSE's perspective. If it's green, which you see that there's one of them, it's a metric that PSE plans to use. If it's yellow, it's an option right now to consider. Could maybe go one way or another. If it's blue, it means it was used in a previous distributional equity analysis. And then everything that's blank in white is where everyone can add thoughts. So when I share this link in the chat, feel free to zoom in, read through some of these different sticky notes and these existing metrics, and you can provide your thoughts, add new things like Megan was sort of rattling off right directly on the white sticky notes. You can click on one and start typing in them. And if there's something that you really like, that you want to like +1, you can grab one of these lightning bolts and throw it over to the place that you like. And then finally, if you right click on any of these sticky notes, you can add a comment, and some of the sticky notes already have a comment that has something to consider. And finally, if this is all too much for you and you're just like, let me just track what's happening here and I'll just ready to talk about it when we talk about it, that's cool too. So I am going to quick pause. Does that make sense of what we're asking you to do? Sort of review these existing metrics and provide feedback? Okay. So I'm going to share this link in the chat. If you're having any access issues, you can come off mute, let us know, use the chat. And we will plan to come back at around, let's say 6:15, 6:17, 18. So feel free to balance out your break with responding to this prompt, and we'll go from there. Okay. So this is individual time. If you want to turn off your cameras and focus, feel free to do so. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thanks, folks. Okay. I'm gonna call people back, and mostly what I'm doing is calling people back if you're on a break in this exact moment. So if you can hear my voice and you're near your computer or phone or whatever device you're using for the meeting, we'll call you back. if you're using and engaging with the mural, that's great. Please continue to do so. But if folks can let me know if they're back, would be helpful. And if you're able to get your camera on, that's helpful and beneficial. I see some thumbs ups. Cool. Yeah, Marco, is your hand up? Maybe not. Oh, maybe your hand up was telling me that you're back.
Yeah, I was just saying I was back.
There we go. See, I figured it out. Cool. Okay. So, hopefully this won't be too disorienting as we're looking at this screen, and I'm going to invite people to continue to share. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read what folks are saying and sharing. I'm going to encourage participants in the meeting to react to what your colleagues are including here. And I'm going to ask PSC staff, Michael, and others to also react to what's happening here. And actually, likewise, anyone, including members of our team. So I'm going to do some zooming in, and hopefully that will help focus away from maybe the distraction of a bunch of flying cursors. So in the qualitative metrics portion, we have some existing metrics that were here about stories from low-income customers, tribal community participation in project locations, used in the past, how communities chose their project sites and technologies. That was a little bit about Michael's example with the Nooksack tribe, how projects support community missions, type of community organizations supported, technology choices based on community needs versus solar benefits. And also, I was just going to say, as I see in the chat, Elizabeth said, I'm trouble writing comments. If you're having an issue, don't worry about it. We'll just talk about it out loud here in a second. Or you can use the chat here and we'll bring it over. So some qualitative metrics that have been included that people added. Geographic location, maybe someone will want to speak more about that. Socioeconomic identifiers of those who are accessing. Someone said community outreach engagement, such as event, individual interviews, workshops, survey, collection of feedback and stories. Someone says stories regarding the ease of accessing the program, barriers felt, stresses felt. So getting a little bit more into the sort of well-being portion, and how to frame as an opportunity for communities. So that was our current reactions on qualitative metrics, and you can see the lightning bolts on where people are responding positively. On quantitative metrics, we have more options here, things that were used in the past and some things that are considering participation rates. There's a little comment hovering over the participation rates, which adds some nuance that I'll point to in a second. Job creation numbers, financial returns and savings, environmental benefits, count of customers no longer experiencing burden, count of participating customers, subscribers in highly impacted communities, et cetera, et cetera. I want to take more time here reading on what folks are saying. So folks are contributing and saying number of community-based organizations that are led and serving named communities accessing benefits, collection of demographic data of program participants, analysis of participant data and overall demographic data as state, county, city, marginalized communities. So that's coming up a couple of times. Outreach materials translated in different languages, energy bill reduction across different energy users profiles, more demographic information, how much is money is saved by businesses, how does it go back into communities? That's a great sort of like the opportunity cost or opportunity benefit. Measure of outreach effort and effectiveness in outreach to marginalized communities, rate of success in acquiring a loan, time to pay off loan and beginning of benefit from the program. I think that's a little bit of what Megan was sharing earlier. The number of contractors worked from named communities working on NEM projects, a lot of lightning bolts there. Number of named community beneficiaries. Feel free to keep using the sticky notes, and you should be able to just click and type, but if that's an issue, feel free to just speak aloud. So I'm going to open it up here a little bit, both for EAG members, participants, PSC folks, reactions to what people have been contributing. Is there anything that someone wants to add more nuance about? Is there anything that there's a question about? Is there anything that really like resonates with you that you want to draw attention to? What do you want your peers to know and hear about what people are contributing. Again, I'm going back to the first sort of setup of today's meeting and some of the tensions that were flagged, because I think something that this is totally all on the table. So we talked about sort of this like relationship between the adoption and the benefit, and several folks in the meeting have talked about sort of the what they would like to see better by way of the adoption and sort of opening up that adoption, opening up that access and accessibility. And so, Amy, you're talking about that. The way that you just said that, I'm not putting it in that category, but I'm hearing it in that way. And so there is an opportunity to sort of measure how well that adoption has become more accessible for communities. And that in and of itself is part of an impact that hopefully we can also call a benefit. So it's an interesting, those things get really overlapping, and I see several things here and in that comment that are all relevant to the way that things, strengths-based community partnership. So that's an important part. People talked about outreach here, for example. How easy was a program? Those are all part of those adoption things that we want to see improved upon. So thanks, Amy. Glenda, mention on this relationship with jobs. Okay. I'm curious, PSC folks, is there anything that's resonating with you or anything that you want to sort of dive in a little bit deeper? Anything that you're either seeing as you read through this or that you're hearing? Floor is open. I'll invite anyone to jump in.
I'll just say from my perspective, I know that we're watching this. It's really fascinating to see everything being entered in real time. So I think there's a lot of processing and digesting happening from PSC folks. I'm seeing a little bit of like back end chatter and stuff like that. So it's definitely stimulating. It's moving on. Michael, I don't know if you have anything that's coming up for you.
So I'll just say I'm glad to see that people are questioning assumptions, that they're not sort of accepting that this is where things are and we have to continue going forward, that they're questioning how we got here and some of the things that we need to focus on. And then the tensions that we're seeing in this program. So appreciate the engagement there.
And I'm curious if there is, I think imperfectly, I know I can do some zooming in as well too. If there is any sort of things that are imperfect thoughts about, even if it's not a direct, like in that bullet, that person said this thing, like what is coming up or raising for the conversation and dialogue. I think it would be helpful to sort of package and sort of resolve, at least for the purpose of today's meeting, whether it's an explicit reaction or it's like, this is making me think about X, Y, or Z. I'm sure people would benefit hearing even the imperfect processing thoughts.
I can speak to some of the demographic information. We certainly have the data for where are the customers who are participating located in our service area. And at that level of location, we have at least an estimate of whether are they low income or non-low income customers. And then we can also map them within a status of, are they within a geography of a census tract that is designated as a highly impacted community or not? We can also see what level of vulnerability in our vulnerable populations, high, medium, or low, are those customers located in. And I think at a very broad level, it will be interesting to see how income and those statuses of named community play out in terms of, are we finding within named communities, are there customers who are not low income who are participating, or vice versa? That will add a little bit more perspective to the results.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to take a brief moment to read. Oh, actually, yeah, let's go, Monica. You go first. And then I'll say something here, and then I'm curious. Before we wrap today, we're going to do just sort of back overview, sort of reflection back. Dennis tracked earlier on. It's like there was that pie chart, and it's, this is one part of this 80 megawatt portfolio. There are these other programs, and some of them are things that are more familiar, or not familiar, sorry, more sort of recent, for example, like community solar. And so I think one of these tensions that it's like we should just make sure that we're holding and understanding constantly is this relationship between adoption versus benefit. And to go back to C's point from early on in the meeting too, it's like benefit and disadvantages. Like that's an important part of, this full question around equity and inequities. And so, yeah, Monica, you said that super well. We don't want to just track sort of bad data or that doesn't actually lend itself to us making improvements in our programs, and where are there more opportunities for the respective rockets that are still on the launch pads, that there's still conversation about what boosters are adjusted, et cetera, for us to do that. And so hopefully we can reflect that a little bit as we look at the rest of the 80 megawatt portfolio. But yeah, we'll move there in a second. And we'll go to Charlie's hand and then C's hand.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, we're not going to do this exactly in this meeting, but it's like, think about all these things that are here. We're gonna consider, and this is naturally going to happen as being on the EAG or on the LIAC. You're going to interact with all these other types of programs and do that sort of distinguishing of what feels appropriate for the NEM, what feels appropriate for some of these other conversations. So, yeah, that's a great point, Charlie. Thank you. C, you asked earlier on about the capacity question, and so you've helped us come back full circle around some of your flags or concerns about that focus. Okay, good. I want to also briefly acknowledge here that there was a sort of questions bike rack. If you were at our retreat, you'll know that we use the term bike rack. Things that we want to park to the side that we'll come back to later. So appreciate you folks jumping straight in here. And there's several questions here that we'll try to see how they come up. And I think the thing that I'll just speak for myself very frankly, and maybe the Uncommon Bridges team perhaps, is that we're trying to understand where some of these themes come up so that we're not just discreetly starting and stopping when we talk about a program. We're trying to break these into these more systematic conversations as well. So I'm not going to read them in this moment, but I just want to acknowledge that there's some good questions here in the bike rack to acknowledge. So wonderful. Okay. I'm going to transition us here shortly. I'm going to actually stop share so I can switch screens. Michael, as I transition over, anything else that you want to say as a reaction to the metrics feedback? And then we can move into just a brief overview for 10 minutes or so on the rest of the portfolio and conversation that would like to have a little bit down the line.
Sure. I guess one thing that occurred to me was, the questions around access and even awareness. I just think about, like, for myself, I don't have solar panels in my home, but if I was going to go about doing that, I mean, I see them around and I think about, well, what would I do? And I suppose, one thing is you can go Google it and figure out how do I do solar panels in Washington, or I could imagine, maybe I'm in a family situation, I'm at the soccer game and I'm talking to some other parents, and one of them says, "Oh, I have solar panels. This is what you do." Or I have friends that have done it, and I would probably go ask them. But just, I thought about that, kind of social network and access that way. How does that, and, I'm just curious about that story in NEM, in the program, how that came about, how does it proliferate? As when you find the quantitative side, what are the things that the group of people have in common that do have access and participated, and what's going on with those social networks and acquisition that way. And I think, Ishmael, there might be one other comment from PSE before we transition. I'm just wanted to check with you on that.
Sure. Yeah, please. I'll open that up if there. Yeah, please jump in.
Hi, I think I was asked to comment on the discrepancy between the 80 megawatts and the 220 megawatts. So I just wanted to frame that up for us. Basically, what we decided was that anything that was required by law was not going to be counted towards our 80 megawatt target in the CEIP. So the law stated that we had to offer net metering until we reached that 4% of 1996 load, which was 179 megawatts. Once we hit the 179 megawatts, then continuing to offer net metering became a voluntary thing that that we as a utility chose to do. So really what we're doing under the CEIP is counting new net metering beyond that 179 megawatts, and that started in March of last year after we hit that 179 megawatts. Hopefully that helps to kind of frame that up, but we've had customers installing net metering since 1998. We're here today, we've hit a target, and we're starting to count towards our CEIP goals, anything beyond what was mandated for us to do. And the net metering is one component of that 80 megawatt target. Hopefully that helps frame that up a little. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. Okay. Okay, so actually that was a good segue as well. So as we get to the close of the meeting, two things. One is, and I'll ask Ariam to help with this in sort of the background. If folks are watching in from YouTube, we will be approaching the window opportunity for public comment period. I believe Ariam will provide those instructions to y'all directly in the YouTube sort of chat space. We'll look and be on the eye if folks are joining so that we can provide space to do so. In the interim, I will give Michael a little bit of time here and just sort of tee up what this broader picture looks like around the 80 megawatt portfolio, which we've been referencing and that you teed us off with.
Great. And Ishmael, if you could just cue me in on time. I want to do a good job here through this set of slides, but also very conscious of the limit of time.
Plan for like 10 minutes, and if someone jumps in for public comment, I'll stop you sooner.
Okay, great. So thank everybody for all your comments, your conversations, your critical thoughts around the net energy metering program. So returning, you can see the pie chart. This is the full representation, again, of by the end of 2025, what do we have planned and anticipate that 80 megawatts will be comprised of. And again, Dennis pointed out, most of it is net energy metering. It's about 70%. And we've just been discussing that. So what we want to do is think about the larger equity question for this part is how do we represent that fairly when we assess for equity? What would you want to assess across all these programs in order to consider what would communities want? I think there might be one more advance on the slide where the question comes up. Maybe it's at the end, sorry. So what I'm going to do is quickly step through descriptions of the program, and I just ask you to kind of these high-level descriptions and keep that in mind, all the robust discussion we just had and how that might apply to some of these other programs. I'm not going to spend much time here because we've already gone through net energy metering. One note I want to add is that at the very bottom it says consumer driven. That means it's coming from the customer, that the customer is really instigating or beginning and starting the process of wanting to participate in this program. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, in contrast, when we talked about net energy metering was not designed with equity in mind, both multi-occupant solar and the solar energy credit rate were designed with equity in mind. And so we know, well, hey, if you're in a multifamily housing situation, it's very difficult to be able to site or put panels on your roof and get access to the electrical system and all that. So we designed multi-occupant solar as a program with that in mind. As you can see, a building owner can install solar systems on their building and then share that credit with the renters or apartment dwellers that are in that property. And so that's a new program that we've just launched recently, lowers costs for both the property owners and the occupants. And then the other part of that program, the solar energy credit rates, often for a school or a business or that sort of thing, where a PSE pays for the excess energy in their bill credits, where we cite a system on that particular facility. And for both of those, I want to say that in terms of equity, there's up to $250,000 per project available if it's cited in service of low income or historically underserved communities. So that's worth noting in the design of this program. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, community solar. This one, both community and utility driven, where we cite a project at a given location, and then people who are not at the project site are able to subscribe for those benefits. And so that means you can get solar powered energy for your home, even if you don't have the panels at your place. About 40% of this program right now is income eligible solar, community solar. So that means you don't pay into the program. You get the benefit on your bill of having your subscription to the program. Again, and that's so one that started out as a community solar program and then had an equity addition module built into it as it went forward in time. Let's go ahead to the next one. Solar grants. So here again, in the red, mostly nonprofits, community-based organizations, and tribes, community-driven. And this is where grants are given to organizations for solar projects of their own design, as it says there, reduces their operating costs for electrical energy. And then in turn, they're able to use those funds for whatever their particular organization does for its mission. So whether it's for food security, improving food security for community, improving shelter, improving cultural sanctuary, any one of those types of things and others as well could be used with the savings from those monies. And I believe correct, EAG members have sat on some of these grant application reviews, and that's part of the equity that has been built into this particular program. And then let's go to the last one. So RFP grid projects are utility driven as part of our portfolio. We do assess for equity in terms of where are they located and track that information, but they don't deliver any local energy to the folks right around that site. They're designed to supply energy overall to our system, to our peak demand. And so we cite these projects at a customer location, and I believe there's an incentive that they get paid or some kind of leasing payment that's a part of the project proposal or part of the project agreement. I think we purchased the power from them, if I remember correctly from my notes. But so this is a program, again, there isn't local energy provided. It goes all to the grid. And you can see the other project details right there. So that gives you a quick walk around the block, so to speak, of the component programs of the 80 megawatts. And again, what we want to think about is maybe going to the next slide. How do we assess all these megawatts? How can we find some agreement on this? The history is back again when we did the pilot study and talked to you about that. We chose 2 community solar programs to demonstrate the methodology. And then when we submitted that to the UTC, the feedback we got back was, hey, that's not sufficient in order to really measure this full 80 megawatts. You need to go back and get a shared agreement among interested parties and such of what is it going to take to really assess this full 80 megawatts. And so that's what we're here to reflect on with the remaining time we have is what would be a good way to evaluate this and what should we consider? And so I'll stop there. For one more advance, Ishmael, the question should pop up here, I believe. So our thought around that was, what would make a distributional equity analysis most useful to named communities when you think about all these programs?
And I'll just say two things. One, happy to go back to any of the slides if there's something that's like, wait, I had a little bit more context that I wanted about that. We always intended, even beyond sort of the interest in remaining time, that this would be sort of a very high level initial ideas gathering. But yeah, wanted to make sure that folks got a chance to see this today in the context of the conversation we had earlier. So feel free again, Charlie, like I said, high level for everyone else too, imperfect processing. That's what today, this moment is right here. So, yeah, C,
Um,
one of those sort of adoption, discussions and issues around how that, you explicitly said how that can be better advertised. Yeah. Other reactions as you all were, oriented across the portfolio. And I think it is an interesting way to think of this question of what would make a DEA most useful to named communities. So it's sort of if you think about the outcomes or impacts, rather than just sort of again, going back to Monica's point of like, we don't want to be measuring sort of the bad things or a bad program. So how can that be a useful thing, across this portfolio? Yeah, Dennis.
Thank you. I'm really processing this tonight. But I just wanted to clarify, Michael, at the beginning of this section, did you say that basically all of this, there are programs that are approached, like, so the customer's asking for the program or asking to be a part of it? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so there were three types of qualities that we flagged in the slides. If it was consumer driven, then that's, hey, I've got a house, I want to put this on it. I'm the one who's initiating and driving it forward. And then there are some that are partnerships, community and utility driven on community solar, for example. The utility is interested in getting more of these projects up, and some communities say, hey, we'd like to partner with you. And then I believe the solar grants was community driven, where an organization is applying like, yeah, we would like that, for our community. So we're distinguishing between those. And then finally on the RFP one, there are some where utility has a requirement or maybe looks at its infrastructure system and says, if we put a battery system here, it would help us solve a problem in our infrastructure. And so the utility is really driving, why are we putting a DER there in a sense? Jenny, when I was saying, gee, I don't have panels on my house and I don't know how I'd go about doing it unless I started Googling it or talking to somebody who has them, right?
Yeah, one thing I'll just say too, 'cause there's a level of complexity in what this question is ultimately asking, which will, Jenny, I'm one of those people. I do not have the technical context. Trust me when I say we had multiple meetings about this coming up to this, and that's like, okay, I'm getting it now. So, you're all good. The distributional equity analysis is sort of this like evaluation kind of tool, and you're trying to be able to, we talked a lot about a NEM. It was like, it wasn't intended for this at the, in the design. And so there's this like twofold of the like design of programs, or not, I mean, more than twofold. There's the design of programs, there's the like promotion, marketing, availability of programs. That's like sort of the adoption piece. And then there's the like, quote, I'll use the word effectiveness of programs, or sort of the like quality and impact of programs. And so there's all those things connect with each other. And so your point is well taken, because you're making those connections. And I think ultimately part of what these conversations are today is about how can something like a DEA, distributional equity analysis, help us learn about sort of the quality, that sort of evaluation piece that then helps us, it could help us make some of those decisions. And so your flag might be that like, hey, some of these things are inherently good. People should know more more about them. And I think a lot of the conversation we had today too was about, again, I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but I keep resonating with Monica's piece around like, we don't want to just be like, let's measure this and measure this when we ultimately want to be able to actually get something useful. So I think that's what kind of the point of this question is like, how can we actually have things from an information standpoint, analysis standpoint, useful for Native communities? Cool. Okay. So we are at time. So I wanna thank everyone for participation. We like really stuck through it. I hope you all did take a little bit of a break when I called for a break. I'm gonna like try and make that a thing, like drink some water and stretch. I did a full like hamstring stretch during the break. But yeah, appreciate y'all for your contributions and time. Hopefully this spurs a lot of conversations. We want to keep these threads going through the rest of other meetings. We didn't have anyone jump in for public comment today, but that's okay. And so I want to just remind people again, fill out the Eventbrite if you're on the EAG and we're planning for the retreat. Please, please, please do that. And otherwise, we're around. We're available if you want to be in touch, but hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings. There's still like some light out.